Welcome to Kim Talks Resilience, where we share stories of insight and inspiration in life, love, and business with resilient women from around the world. Speaking with authors, entrepreneurs, founders, and coaches to learn their strategies for a more resilient life so we can all build the life we love. I'm your host, Kim Hayden. Alrighty, super excited to be back here in studio and having an opportunity to explore kind of what makes us tick. How do we keep ourselves moving forward? And it takes all different avenues. I'm a firm believer that there are so many ways that we can achieve. I mean, what is that saying? That there's many routes to the top of the mountain, and none of them are wrong. All of them can lead you onward. But it's up to us to put one foot in front of the other. And so today, our guest is actually going to give us some insight and some you know awareness around some things you can do to find that greater fulfillment, right? So Aline supports people to establish solid foundations for spiritual growth and soul fulfillment so that they can establish a direct, self sustained connection to the divine through nothing but themselves. Developing solid foundations leads us to being more connected, lighter, and clearer. This is why Aline Ra M says spiritual growth and soul fulfillment, because the more we connect to the divine within us, the more we get to live in joy from within. So, uh, in a society where everybody is kind of thinking me, there may be a positive to this, right? So, welcome to the show, Aileen. How are you today?
Hi, Kim. Nice to be here with you today. Super excited to go deeper into this subjects that I love so much.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking to be I'm looking to learn. I always look to learn. I come to each podcast open and ready. Even if I think I already know everything, I put all that aside and I learn with the listeners. That's my goal. But before we dive into what you do, I'd really like to kind of uncover or reveal who is a lead. So, why is this a quest? And before you start that, where are you coming from?
So I was born and raised in Brazil, and I lived nomadically. So officially live in Sweden, but I spent 6 weeks there in the last 2 years. So I am a person of this planet, so to speak.
Excellent. Well, you must love the
Yes.
fact that we have 54 countries and growing that give nomad workers uh, working visas and living visas within their countries now. So we're at last
Yes,
counts
wonderful.
54. So it's happening. Like we're making that global
Yes.
opportunity. So tell
Yes,
us, who is Aileen?
that is a big question to ask somebody who works with spirituality, because that is the whole point of spirituality, to uncover who we truly are. So I wish I had a quick answer to this. We can do a whole episode just on that specific question. As I see myself, I am life itself. I'm an expression of life. And I see life as sacred. Every single one of us is a piece of the divine. Now, talking more concrete terms, I am a person who loves movement. I'm not a person who can stay. Of course, I can meditate for hours, as many people in this path. It's not about an inability to be silenced as much as I love movement in many different aspects, from dancing, from exercising, from talking, from dancing. As a human being, I am a person who feels that things stagnate in us too fast, and that is brings so many issues in our lives. Is, when we stagnate and things feel constricted, I don't enjoy feeling myself constricted in any way, shape, or form. I am a person who likes to feel the movement and the expansion of life. Feelings, allowing our emotions to run through us, to not keep overthinking about things, to just releasing things. That's who I am. I am a person who's always letting go and receiving things. That's how I think I can put it in the most concrete way, if I may.
Well, it's being open. So some people will come on one of my shows, and I think people who listen to me pretty regularly will know that I do not believe in lack. I believe in opportunity and taking action, be it no matter what that action is. That action can be sitting peacefully and waiting for more information to come, or that action can be
Yeah.
leaning into the information, but it's taking action. And opportunities, I believe, are always around us. So I
Mm.
love that don't be stagnant, and keep movement, because when we, it's kind of like the duck, right? We may look really green on top of the water, but are you keeping afloat? Are you keeping that movement? Are you doing all
Yes.
that? I'd love to dive in. I love that you're a nomadic, because that is my goal. That is my goal. I want to force Gump my life around this world, the rest of my life, sitting on park benches talking to people. But until I
Yeah,
get
that's
there,
beautiful.
I want to learn more about what you do and what can I learn today. So
Yes.
take it away.
I work as a spiritual guide, energy healer, and teacher, supporting people to develop spiritually, to come more in connection with themselves, which for me, a big part of this is creating a spaciousness in our life. We live very busy lives. And when we are so busy, it is impossible to explore new possibilities of being, to experience different parts of ourselves, to see clearly, when we are so busy and so much turmoil in us, it is impossible to have that still image of what is actually going on inside of us. So creating this spaciousness to live, I find super important. And it's all connected to the heart, because for me, the heart is spacious. The mind is busy, but the heart is spacious. So I support people to come back to themselves and grow spiritually in a way that also brings them fulfillment, because they come to this better understanding of who they are and what they want, and what are their next steps in life, to live in alignment with what they want. It's so easy to say I want this, but don't do anything about it. Like, this is my value, but then not behave like that. So the point is to come into alignment, because it is this alignment that brings us inner peace and fulfillment in a way. Because the more we are out of alignment with what we think we want, the more stress we experience within ourselves. There's like this separation in us.
Absolutely. Um, I'd like to dive a little bit more into this alignment and how you work people, because that's a word that really resonates with me, is alignment. And I
Mm.
think we all go through different phases, right? So, when you think of the phases of the girl, the mother, the crone, right? Well, we through life go through different phases, right? And our
Yeah.
friendships go through different phases, and our workspaces go through different phases. And what's really fascinating is there's been a lot of guilt associated to being fluid up until the pandemic. And the pandemic, I think, released the opportunity for people to speak about their fluidity around what they're doing or what they're moving through. Because
Mm.
up until that point, everybody was expected to have a 40-year job, to have one partner, to have, 2.1 kids. There was all these expectations, and you didn't talk about what aligned with you if it didn't align with what other people's expectations were. I think that was a lot of soul killing. So
Yeah.
I'd like to actually open this conversation a bit and go through, and I hate to break this down into those concrete terms, but these are the terms that people understand. And if we can get them thinking, then
Yeah.
we can maybe move them. I want to talk about alignment and those
Yeah.
3 steps, because finding alignment can lead us to being open to spirituality.
Yes, and living the life we truly want, living our fulfilled lives, because deep down we all know what we want. We might have issues acknowledging it. We might have fear of being judged and of failing. Those things are real. I understand that, but that doesn't change the fact that we know what we want. And sometimes we have a huge issue just acknowledging and accepting and embracing what we want. And right there, we get out of alignment, because the first step of alignment is our ability to be honest with ourselves. We talk all the time about honesty with other people, but I mean, honest with other people is the second step. It all begins with our ability to recognize and then acknowledge what we're going through, what we need, what we want. And the first step of that is simply allowing ourselves to see that and creating that spaciousness for us. And it doesn't need to be super big, you know, it's not like you need to go on a retreat or something like that, but infusing our lives with a little some pauses can bring us into deep alignment. So for instance, if we have a super busy schedule, can we have 5 minutes between two meetings and ask ourselves, what is the intention of this next meeting I'm going? Why am I going there? Am I just doing for doing its sake? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing in my life? It doesn't take much. It just takes the guts to stop and ask ourselves and answer. And then at the end of that meeting, see, go back to that and have I fulfilled my intention? It's not like we can always fulfill it. Of course, there are other people involved that might also have other issues bringing up to us and priorities change. But it begins with that first creating the space to
Yeah.
create the intentionality and then the ability to go back to it. So it's
Yep.
not enough to just have the intention. We have to go back to it and assess ourselves. How are we doing? Another simple way to do this is at the end of every day, before going to bed, taking 5 minutes before going to sleep and asking ourselves, how was my day? What were the highlights of my day? What made me happy this day? Maybe I just bumped into somebody on the street I hadn't seen in a long time and, acknowledge the joy and the gratitude for that moment. And the other way around, what didn't go so well on that day? What is it that I am responsible for in my life to make better tomorrow? So creating pauses of self-reflection, it doesn't need to be long. It is more that they become a habit because that is how we start creating alignment. Alignment is not something we do on a day. Many people go on retreats, have all these great ideas, but come back and lose it. It is the small habits. It is how we live our everyday lives. Yeah.
And I there's something that you said that I absolutely like totally clicked into was I've had a lot of people throughout the course of my interviews tell me you should never even acknowledge a negative. Don't write it down. Don't think about it when it happens. And I'm sitting there going, but how do you learn if you cannot assess the feedback?
Yeah.
Right? It's like Edison. Edison did not fail making the light bulb 10,000 times. He found 10,000 ways it would not work.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that because I think that we're destined to make the same mistake over and over if we don't acknowledge when things aren't right so we can break them
Absolutely.
apart and we can move forward.
A lot of our suffering comes from repetitive patterns. If we don't allow ourselves to see the patterns, we cannot break them. Now, it's not necessarily negative in a way. It is a fact of life. This was not that good. I don't have to
Yeah.
suffer and like grow into this turmoil. It's acknowledging maybe it wasn't even that bad. Maybe it was just like this encounter with my mother was okay, but it wasn't that nice. I could have done more to connect deeper with her. Is assessing the points where I can give more of myself, where I can make this better for myself. So it's not a problem. It's a point of awareness of opportunities in a way. This can be better. I can do this better. You know?
I totally agree. So when we're moving in, it's being aware. So I think that's the
Yeah.
the very first thing that I'm really taking away here is
Yes.
gaining awareness, right?
Mm.
Um, what about those who are stuck in the cycle of the woulda, shoulda, coulda? And we see this a lot. We saw about the
Yeah.
self-flagellation, the shame, all these things. I should have done this. I wish I'd done that. I'm guilty. I'm
Yeah.
guilty. I am like this with my children.
Yeah.
And I pull to the top instead of being in the moment of a great Sunday dinner where they've come over to get a free meal from mom. Um, something is said or done, and I immediately throw back to what I view as a failing as an adult, as a parent. So I know people live with this constant loop of woulda,
Yeah.
coulda, shoulda. That has to be a block for
For sure.
gaining So walk me through that. How does, so we're talked about alignment, creating awareness. How about that? How do we get rid of those gremlins? What do we do?
That's a huge work, and it starts with recognizing who's telling us that, because that is coming from our minds. It's not from our hearts. Our hearts will never shout at us. So creating this awareness that this is my mind, that it is judging me and it's not being my best friend now, and developing some self-compassion, because we're all good people, we're doing our best, but we don't know everything at any given moment. We all have our limitations at any moment. I mean, it's a big world full of information and possibilities. So having some self-compassion for being human, which also supports us to have self compassion for others around us. That is how we create a more compassionate society. So that is one aspect of it. Is understanding that this is from our minds, and we are allowing our minds to run our lives, and not coming into the spaciousness of the heart. The mind is a very busy place. The mind doesn't stop talking. And much of this path is about creating this spaciousness, and mindfulness practices or meditation or simple intentionality breaks, creating these spots. So this would be my first thing that I will bring into awareness, that we can develop a little bit more self-compassion and self-acceptance. And then it's understanding that maybe we don't have to do anything. Maybe all the things that we should or could, says who? Like,
Yeah.
you know, do I really? Should I really? you know, creating creating this moment of new possibilities of life. The life doesn't have to be in this specific way or that we are responsible for our lives for sure, but we can create new paths. We can create new ways to relate to our families, to our loved ones. We don't need to just keep following the status quo, because that shouldn't, that have to, they are following the status quo, which is a sign of reacting to life as it is and not proactively creating our lives. Which is kind of living like a robot, unfortunately. We're living autopilot and we don't realize it. It is unconscious. And of course, it saves energy, has many benefits, and that's why we do it. At the same time, the more we create this intentionality and taking this step back, the more chance we have to slow down and tell that voice, like, it's okay. And a huge point of this as well, when we talk about the heart space, we all talk about gratitude, be able to receive and take things in. But there's a counterpart, because gratitude is about our ability to receive, right? But there is the balance of giving, of allowing things to leave us. And this is the harmony to give and receive. And in this sense, in this topic, what would be beautiful for us to give is more forgiveness, more self forgiveness, especially in this moment. Saying, I forgive myself for not having done this so well today. So, coming back even to the topic we were talking about before, maybe not everything in this day was great, but I forgive myself for my mistakes and I learn from them so I can make it better tomorrow. You know,
Yeah, toddlers don't learn to walk without banging their head a few times.
yeah,
And that wasn't a mistake. It was a way for them to learn how to be upright. And I think we forget all that we do before 2.
yeah,
And think about how much we accomplish before the age of 2 or 3. We literally are learning language, motor skills, feeding ourselves, dressing ourselves. We learn so much, and yet I think we learn more between the ages of 0 and 3 than we allow ourselves to learn over the age of 30.
yeah. When we're not judging ourselves so much, we're just living and we're learning as we live. There's no more to it. We lose so much of the playfulness, and life is to be lived. Life is to be joyful. I understand that not every single moment is gonna be joyful, but we can live at every moment. We can be present in every moment, and we can understand that we can be lighter. One of my favorite quotes, I don't even know exactly where it comes from, but it's do everything as if it was all that matters, and do it knowing it doesn't matter at all. So this duality to life, that of course we care about things and we love them and we do them with care and well, but not worry and desperate about them, because then we get out of love. So this lightness of the heart is also important. Then we can do things caring and playfully and lightly at the same time. It doesn't have to be in this place of worry and suffering and hustling. Life is not a struggle. Life is challenging, but it should not be a struggle. It doesn't have to be a struggle.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
you know what? And the reality is, it's kind of like when you eat a really good meal, you're typically going to have something sharp and something sweet and something tart and something savory. And that's what creates this layer of flavor. And when you expect only one flavor in your life, you know, is that really a robust serving? I really think about this. I had a great meal the other night, and uh, they had this like curry custard duck confit, and it was paired. It was a wine and South African dish pairing, and you sit there and you just taste all the flavors. But if you just kind of ignored it or chose to only do half of it, it wouldn't have been the full experience. So there's my food analogy, folks. I love food. What can I
Sure.
say? I love food. So walk me through real quick, when
Yeah.
somebody comes to you, what does that look like? So they start with you. What does that look like?
I work in quite different ways with people depending on their own journeys. So I work with people in specific, like 8-week programs where I set their solid foundations for spiritual growth and self fulfillment, which is great for people who are interested in spirituality and personal growth, but had never had a real like teaching and daily practices. So I create this foundation for them so that they can better self regulate themselves, know themselves better, become lighter and more connected. It is like 8 weeks, you got the foundation, so to say. And then I also have a spiritual mentorship, which is not so structured of a program, where I work more with channeling practices to people to dissolve their current blockages. So it's a much more tailor-made and one-on-one, using my spiritual capabilities, so to speak. So I work with people that are just starting their path and people who have been on this path for a long time. But I also have like online courses, and I give healing sessions in person and remotely. So I do quite a few different things, and it really depends on what the person needs. And I see that. So normally the person just comes for a discovery meeting first, and we see from there what they need. So yeah.
Excellent. So, very tailored. It sounds as if there's a lot of tailored options to individuals.
Yeah.
So we s- we don't move into greatness without having a challenge. Typically, there's something that
Yes.
that inspires us, or you know is the catalyst. Can you share with us a time that, through resiliency, without that moment that you could pull on, that you may not be on this path, a time that was really, really challenging for you?
Well, the moment that was very challenging for me was actually when I started before I started working with spiritual growth. I used to work with a business. I've been on the spiritual path for a very long time, since I was a teenager, but I never thought I was going to work with this. This was only my own path and something I didn't talk to people about it. I was very cautious about what I shared with people back then. And I went to business school and I worked with business development for a long time. Until my late 20s, I came to a point where I couldn't break myself in two. There was all the spiritual part that I was hiding, and then there was my office life. And I came to a point that I felt I didn't have any choice but to quit my a socially accepted life, so to speak. So I left my job, I broke up my relationship, I left my home. It was all happening quite fast, and I had no plan. I didn't know what I was leaving my job for. I had no idea that years later I was going to work as a spiritual guide. It was nothing clear. It was literally, I'm going to take some time off and I'll see what happens. And I thought back then naively that all I needed was 3 months, and I would come up with my own business, and just do this. And time kept passing. And when I quit my job and everything, I had funds for 1 year. Like, okay, I'll figure it out. I'll figure this out in 1 year. And then after 1 year, I had no idea. And then after 2 years, I had no idea. And after 3 years, I had no idea. And somehow everything worked out. And it's like, for me, it was one of the biggest spiritual moments of my life to understand how supported we are and that everything can work out if we are committed to ourselves. It is up to us. Like, our power is insane. But that said, when I quit everything, people kept on telling me how brave and courageous I was to leave everything. And I didn't feel back then that was so courageous. What I felt was courageous and resilient of my part was to stick to that decision, even after not knowing what I was doing 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years after. So, like, this self integrity and high alignment of, I am not quitting. I know I can come back to an office job at any time, but I don't want to. This is not the life I want. This is not for me. This is not what I came here for. I have no idea what I came here for, but I am sticking to my commitment to this path and to myself. So for me to be able to stay on that, not knowing, this huge gap of trying different things and, yeah, just keep walking forward no matter what for so long. For me, that was the biggest resilience that I ever saw in myself. And it gives me great strength up to now that I can do what I want to do and it will work out. I just have to be real to myself and stick to myself.
I love that. It will work out. It will work out. 90% of all startups fail. What they don't tell you is that those failures can be like cuts. They're small cuts that can lead to that final. So if you hit 90 roadblocks and you're still pushing, you are now in that point where statistically you're surpassing, and you just got to keep pushing. I mean, I have had days. I have had days where I have pounded my head on my desk, or I have quietly cried in a corner, or wondered what the heck I was doing.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's those who are willing to lead courageously and show, prove, are the ones that change the world, and change the world's, maybe that's just one person at a time, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk real quickly about books. You have a book out. Can you share with us what the reader can expect from the book and where they can get the book?
So, this book, Bullshit Free Mindfulness, An Uncommon Joy for Everyday Life, it's made for people who like to have more spaciousness, joy, and connection in everyday life without actually having to add anything to their life. So, it has no meditation and it's not about theory, it's an extremely hands on and practical book. It brings keys to how to bring more joy and connection to things we already do, like you were talking about food before. So we have food related practices here. So it's using the context of how we live our modern lives in this world. And how can we create that space for ourselves to bring more of our own joy and our hearts into our lives? So that is the point of the book, to be as practical as possible. I'm not here to discuss theory and bring another level of understanding of what mindfulness is can we just live more fully and more consciously right now? So this book brings 50 different practices. And of course, you're not expected to do all of them. You can just open and see what it resonates with you and try the same practice a few times to allow it to show to yourself what is possible in this life with the things that we already have at hand. And you can find this book at Amazon. So it's very simple and easy to find it. You can just type my name, Aline Ra M, on Amazon, and you will find it.
That, and I think I love the fact that there's 50, because the reality is if you're a real keener, you can actually get in here and commit to one a week. If you're like me, you go in and find your top 10 favorites and do them 2, 3 times a month, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I'll tell you, I absolutely agree, Aileen, that too many people are running around and missing the flavor within life. They're missing so much. Old people, when they're surveyed, people in senior facilities, people who are in care facilities, never wish they had spent more time at work.
Yeah.
And yet, we live in a society where I don't know how this happened, but over the last 10, 15 years, the dream has become having a jet, having
Hmm.
4 houses, having, you know, 40 pairs of shoes that are, each, $1,000 each, and
Hmm.
having purses that could pay a year's worth of university tuition. So I'm not sure, folks. I really am not. And I mean, I am sitting here. I live in a nice home. I live in a nice home and I cook great meals for my kids. And my husband and I still do date night every few weeks. We have a
Lovely.
date after 30, almost 30 years of marriage. But I also drive a Volkswagen Bug because who cares? Who cares what you drive? Who cares what shoes you got on? Who cares what purse you're carrying? Nobody cares. At the end of the day, when you are 85, you're not going to sit there and say, I wish I had more shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And it is back to intention. Why do we want the things we say we want? What is the point of wanting them? What are they actually giving us? And this is actually a quite deep subject. I would try to put it in as short as possible here. But the truth is, most of us are not pursuing joy. Most of us are just uh, trying to get out of suffering and pain and discomfort. It doesn't have to be a big suffering, but discomfort. So think about it. Let's go back to food. You've been thinking about pizza the whole day, and then you finally go and get the pizza. What happens normally when we get the pizza? We have the first bite and we enjoy that first bite. And then on the second bite, we are on our phones, we're watching TV, we're talking with somebody. We're no longer tasting the pizza. The pizza that we were craving the whole day, when it is there, we're not there with it. Now, why is that? Are we really going for that thing we think we want because of fulfillment, of joy? Or was it incredibly uncomfortable to crave something we did not have? And we're only going after it to stop suffering, stop the discomfort of the craving. And that is the sad truth when we start seeing our drivers. And this is a huge key to turn to live much more joyfully. Because when we realize what is it that actually brings us joy and we go after that, instead of just coping with the things that are making it uncomfortable, because that is what makes life bland. To not live a bland life, we need to go after what makes us joyful and not just release from discomfort. And it's so subtle. It's so subtle in our everyday life decisions. Yeah.
There is so much to unpack here. And oh, I got the wrong one. Here we go. There we go.
Ah,
There we
wonderful.
go. Ah, it's crazy. Like click one button these days. One button is all it takes. I love everything that you've said, and I love the fact that you're stepping into this space because we need more leaders. There's a lot of people looking for leadership. There's a lot of people looking for a path, and the more options and opportunities that are out there, I'm hoping that people will lean in to them. Right. So, Aline, can you go through all of your contacts? How can people find you, follow you, and what can they expect when they do find you?
Well, the best place to find me is actually on my website, alineram.com. And you can also go to alindra.com/subscribe to get my newsletter, which in the case of my newsletter, what you get is one article per week that I write, going deeper into subject within spiritual growth and self-fulfillment. So writing is a big part of my work and what I do, and a way that I love to share my visions and what I can do to inspire and motivate you to walk forward. So I invite you to check out my newsletter for that. So again, alindram.com/subscribe. And I also have a guide, a free guide, going deeper into what spiritual growth is. So you can go alindram.com/spiritual growth to get your free guide. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, although I have to say I'm not the best at social media. And the best way to keep in touch with me is definitely through my newsletter and writing. I also offer free meditation sessions online every other week, and I do events to bring people together online. So being on my email newsletter is the best way to keep in touch for sure.
Excellent. And that way you're getting some further insight on a weekly basis. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I always like to close the shows out with a quote. What is a quote that's inspiring you today and why?
So one quote that I always repeat to myself is that the mind shouts and the heart whispers. For me, so much of life is becoming more aware of our heart space and living from our hearts. So, whenever we catch ourselves shouting at ourselves and telling ourselves, do this or do that, you should, that is a shout, that is the mind. So, coming back to the spaciousness of the heart, that the mind shouts and the heart whispers, the mind is busy and the heart is spacious. So, I'll like to leave with that.
I have nothing to add. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. They say that, and I love, I mean, I hadn't thought about the heart as being spacious, but as a mother, you know, that as a sister, as a wife, as somebody who cares, you know that you always have room for one more. You always have. So I would say what Aline was talking about, give yourself, show yourself a little love. Make sure you're that one more today. So until next time, I appreciate your time. And you know what? Just be good to yourself. That's all I can say. Be good to yourself.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Thank you for joining us here today at Kim Talks Resilience. I'm your host, Kim Hayden, and I'd love to invite you to our resilient community at resilientgift.com. That's resilientgift.com, and we'll send you our magazine and tickets for upcoming events and all sorts of cool things we do here. So be sure to keep watching. And you know what? Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share, because we all know that sharing is caring.